on this cell, but the new one now right behind it has tornadic properties to it too. So we're going to be watching this very carefully, and the velocity scan is not all that helpful, honestly. This again goes until about 6:30, so this will encompass our entire newscast too. Foxborough and Sharon along 95. Sharon just to the edge of town, you're on this warning, but Foxborough involved in that wholly right now. And there's again not a huge signature here, but you back it up and right near the core of the storm. It is a little bit more descriptive here. Again, let me move this out of the way so we get a little bit better view here, and I'll be on the edge. But right in this area, Diamond Hill, down through Cumberland, Rhode Island, this is the Mass Rhode Island border here, descriptively now near Grants Mills. This is where we would get our rotation to emanate from, but it's not all that impressive right now. The area is broad, meaning if we were to be talking about the potential for a tornado that could come on the ground, it'd be a lot tighter in this particular area too. But this is a whole new cell, a whole new beast here that we're watching, and this is cycling up right now. Velocity scan is showing us that in Foxborough, not all that impressive, but back towards Plainville right now. You want to be in the basement, and these are the towns and the parts of the roads that we're looking at. This again, Rhode Island back here on this border, but you see maybe in Reservoir Road, Hawkins Street, calling out these roads nearby where we have this rotation, Hancock Street to Walnut Street to Bacon Street now across towards Plainville right now. Plainville, the center, right in this area. These are areas to the west, so you're taking cover in this zone. If you're behind this storm in Rhode Island or you're over towards Bellingham, no worries. Woonsocket, all good too. Franklin, it's to the southern end of town, so this is not right in the middle of town. The main part is Plainville that we're looking at right now. Velocity scan too on this view is not all that descriptive either. Let's go over to the rotation scan, which is probably a little bit better. And you can see it picked up a little bit better in here. This is coming out of Cumberland and into Plainville, and that is our cell right there that we're watching very carefully now. The wind shear that you're seeing can sometimes cycle. You can see it as it emanates here. A lot of blue in this smear here, but you see the lighter shades of blue, indicative of a little bit better in the rotation department too. So storm reports out of Foster, Rhode Island with trees and wires down. Earlier we did have some wind damage back into Connecticut as well. That was a lot more vivid than what we've seen in any parts of the Commonwealth as of yet. This was when that storm went through in Connecticut. You can see the trees were sheared off right almost mid-trunk. There's about 10-inch trees too. The wires are down. So that would be indicative of something that may be rotating, or maybe some strong winds that come out of the cloud and down toward the ground. And maybe this was just the onset of the strong wind gusts. But again, this is our new warning that if you're just joining us, just started at 6 o'clock now. This is parts of Plainville, most of Plainville, in fact, and also right on the Mass Rhode Island border that we're watching this tornado warning. And it goes until 6:30. This includes Franklin, this includes Foxborough and Mansfield. You can see too that our real concern would be right in this area. Well, first of all, we have the intense rain. We know that. The hail isn't all that descriptive. It does not look like this is a big hail-producing storm. Lightning is also a feature, but right now it does not look like this is intense in the lightning department either. Rotation analysis, well, if we were to pin down an area specifically that is in concern to us, it's Reservoir Road down through Little Pond County Road. This is over the border in Rhode Island. And Walnut Street, High Street, Hancock Street, and Plainville. The center of Plainville is plain to see right there. You can see it. And that is also in jeopardy for this possibly tornadic storm right now. Again, if you were in this area and you were under a tornado warning, what you want to do is head to the lowest floor of your house or your business. The tornado is imminent. That means it was detected on radar. That does not necessarily mean it's actually going to make touch with the ground. We could have a funnel cloud. We've seen funnel clouds today. There was one off of Newport that we had a visual confirmation of. But this is indicative of some rotation depicted by the radar. Now, we can use the radar tools. There are 3 of them we can use that we can align to say that there's actually a tornado on the ground. We have not reached that point yet. Head to the basement or the lowest level, the center of a building if you don't have a basement for this particular tornadic storm. But most of it is heavy rain right now. There's potential for some strong wind gusts in this cell. But right now we're watching this as possibly a rain-wrapped tornado if there were to be a tornado that would form out of this. So everything is obscured. You're in a shield of rain. the tornado can come out of that. It comes out without really any warning other than the warning we're having now, right now. But this is a case where these rain-wrapped tornadoes can be very deceptive and something that you don't want to take lightly. There's plenty of rain out of this storm cluster that goes back through Rhode Island and back into Connecticut too. You can see that flash flood warnings are ongoing till 8:45 in that stripe. But the rest of the Commonwealth, we're okay. The South Shore, it's looking good right now, other than that concern to our west and southwest of Weymouth. Boston's in just rain. We're seeing rain now on the North Shore. It reaches up into the Merrimack Valley. If you're in Leominster, if you're in Worcester, breathe a sigh of relief, wipe your brow. We are clear. We might have a quick shower, but these are not tornadic storms coming at us, and they're headed more toward the east and northeast. We saw that first cell, if we can pinpoint that. Let me point that out, how this is a separate cell. Right in here was the earlier cell, and this is the new one that's forming too. So earlier we had concerns with this one. That's now faded, and our attention forms back towards the storm coming out of Plainville right now. This is the velocity scan. We look for this. And honestly, you know, I'd like to be using something else other than this radar. This radar is a little bit old, but sometimes old is okay, right? We know that. And so we can try and see some wind fields out of this, but it's not as awesome as we would have with the Doppler radar. So this is an old school stuff, but you can see the red and the green here through North Attleboro and back over towards Plainville, that we're watching this particular cell as it comes out of Rhode Island. Broad rotation, not necessarily a red flag that there is a tornado that is coming out of this cloud, but when you have this rotation, you're always going to get a tornado warning. We're always going to be warning on this because we don't know, and that's the real crux of the situation, when that contraction will come, when that narrowing will come, when we'll see that tornado descend out of the cloud and toward the ground too. Tevin, are you there? Are you also involved in?
Yeah, I'm just checking out the back.
I buy you some time here. Let's talk some more about the rotation analysis. Yeah. You can see too that we've had some wind damage back across parts of Rhode Island, back near Gloucester and Foster, and also into Connecticut. So these storms have had a history, not necessarily this one. Rainfall rates, pretty intense. Although, you know, I think here too, this is not a situation where we're also panicking over the idea of more rain, specifically in Attleboro, but we have it in Franklin and down through Rentham, intense rainfall rates with this particular cell. If we were to probe it, you could see some of these heavy bursts are closer to 2 inches per hour. You can see 1.95 in this particular part right on the Rhode and Massachusetts border. I think that's near Bellingham, just south of Bellingham, south of Franklin too. Storm reports back in the history of Foster, we had some wind damage in Rhode Island. Back in the velocity scan again, this is coming together. I know a little bit more descriptive now in this. If I were to switch over again to maybe the correlation coefficient, you can see that a little bit better. But this is not showing me anything that is alarming, honestly. A sea of red, and in that sea of red, if we see some different colors other than these, which could just be some noise or relics from something else, if we were to also kind of superimpose our velocity scan over that visually now, and something that would be a little bit more in tune with what we'd see with a tornado would be a sea of red and then some vivid colors right over this velocity scan. So again, we're stacking up our products from our Doppler radar to give us a better handle on whether or not we'd see a touchdown here. And right now, it doesn't seem like there'd be one. But I'll tell you, inbound, outbound, if I were to look at this, take off that convective analysis and then probe these wind fields, now we have 16 miles an hour, So what we do is we add these together right now. I mean, like, this is crude, honestly. So we have about 40 plus knots of what we call shear if you add those together. We have a question, Glenn or Priscilla, you were going to ask?
Yeah, I do, Pete. I was just curious about the warning ending at 5:45 and then restarting again by the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Why might that happen? Why wouldn't the threat be consistent?
So we were talking about two separate cells here, Glenn. So one of them was this one, and it came out of that warning area and okay, moved on. But the second one that came into that field was a new tornado warning. So it wasn't necessarily the one that was the big concern dropping and then, oh, it flared up again. It was a new concern for a new thunderstorm. So it's two separate entities.
So we almost have some training going on.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. Absolutely. Good term for it too. Exactly what that is. So when you think, you know, you get one thunderstorm, you think pass by. And then you go, oh, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. This training is what we really get concerned about for flash flooding, not necessarily tornadoes, although we're seeing the thunderstorms move into a field where we see some rotation, and it feeds upon that, and then it goes into a tornadic mode. So that's why we're seeing these multiple warnings too, and carrying through the whole while. Tevin, you were going to jump in here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I could just do a quick time check, pulse check for everyone, and get latest timing on some of these thunderstorms and this still tornado warning storm that's coming through. Glenn talked about the training of some of those showers too, so they're happening over the same spots, like train cars on a train track, thus the name training. For the tornado warning storm that we have, still watching it across portions of Norfolk County, Bristol County as well, and even perhaps Plymouth County too, at the very least to the south and west of Plymouth County. If you're in Foxborough, if you've got family or friends there, give them a call, give them a heads up and say, hey, get to your safe spot right now. This is the area of concern just to the south of I-495 and right along Highway 1 or Route 1 and north of North Attleboro now. Put a track on this because I think ultimately we will see this storm move, but sort of like some of those training thunderstorms, they take all day long to move. Plainville still at 609. I think this storm is moving, Pete, I don't know if you noticed this, 15 miles an hour.
Oh,
so we slowed from 25 earlier today to 20 miles an hour, and now the forward speed is 15 miles an hour. Mansfield at 630, Sharon 652. If it holds it together in Stoughton, which we know that some of these storms have certainly presented that sign, Stoughton at about 705, Brockton, and then Randolph shortly thereafter. But this is the line of concern. Another flash flood warning, by the way, outside of our tornado warning storm, Pete, and this stretches back into portions of Connecticut, into Rhode Island as well. And I think ultimately, even if we see this tornado fade out, which is certainly good news, we still can't let our guard down for the heavy rainfall that's already transpired and the heavy rainfall that's on the way to portions of Norfolk County near Franklin, perhaps Sharon, Avon, and getting awfully so close to Dedham and downtown too, which I know is the sort of the county seat, if you will, of Norfolk.
Yeah, absolutely, Tevin. I'm just actually being proactive, thinking ahead to the other storms that are coming out of Connecticut, whether or not they're going to have rotation too, whether we keep this going through 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. This whole cluster, if we widen the view out, you can see there's a lot involved in here. Never mind the fact that we have the tornado warning, but we also have a lot of flash flood potential here. We also have a training issue. We have a cluster of storms, and if they keep coming into this field that's around Franklin, back towards Brockton, over towards Attleboro, where we've had that rotation, sure, maybe they can feed off of that as well. So again, the caboose is back here in Putnam, Connecticut, but we're not quite out of the woods in terms of the severe weather threat all through the South Shore. Again, our storm that initially kicked off all the fuss is now coming into Weymouth, nothing doing with that other than a burst of heavy rain, but any one of these could be putting down what we know as a wet microburst, where we have the potential to create damaging winds. Priscilla, did you have a question did you want to ask?
Yes. All right, so as we're talking about this storm slowing down and it's really severe right now, is it getting more intense as it slows down, or is it, getting less severe? No,
the forward speed really has nothing to do with the intensity. It could be 45 miles an hour and be severe, or it could be 10 miles an hour and be severe. So the slowing pace is more kind of, I guess, it's slowing down as the upper atmosphere kind of consolidates. Maybe we're compressing the line a little bit, consolidating the line, so individual cells within that line slow down. Not to say that the whole line and the whole area is slowing down altogether. That probably moving at the same pace, although I did not clock it from Weymouth all the way back into parts of central and western Connecticut or eastern Connecticut. But the whole line seems to be progressing steadily, but not fast enough for the folks that are under those heavy bursts of rain either, and the lightning and the thunder too. It's pretty intimidating, especially when we're talking about Attleboro after the weekend we've had, after the early week rains we've had. I mean, this is an area that is just so weary and so anxious about any drops of rain falling. If we were to zoom in on that area right now, Plainville to North Attleboro, I mean, if there's any saving grace, Attleboro itself is outside of that zone of both the intense rain than the tornado. So, I mean, there is some good news in that sense, but Plainville is squarely in that. Cumberland, Rhode Island as well, Rentham, Norfolk, Foxborough as well. But our main concern is not necessarily in those areas. If we can get back to that velocity scan, it is in Plainville. It is in these particular locations. Again, this is the computer shouting out neighborhoods. Maybe if you're old school, you'll know what Wilkins Four Corners is, but certainly haven't heard that myself, or Shepherdville either, and Robinsonville. But we're going to go by street level now and talk about those. We're talking about Elmwood Street, Messenger Street. These are heightened areas of risk for a tornado. Norton Street as well in Plainville, and also South Foxborough too shortly. Again, when we talk about the velocity scan, we look for the couplings between the red and the green. When these are very close together, we have a better idea that there's a tornado on the ground, but that does not seem to be the case right now. This is a precaution, though, when we talk about a tornado warning, that it is potentially any moment that could drop out of the cloud and down to the ground. So it's not like, we go and we wait until we have ground truth confirmation and everybody's like going, there's a tornado on the ground. We are proactive in the sense that we do that before we have that threat, and then it continues on if and when a tornado does touch down. We see that a lot in the Midwest. Those are long track tornadoes, as they're called. They reach the ground and they just stay on the ground. Those are easy to spot sometimes. This is New England. These things drop down in 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and they go back up into the cloud. So there's no time to actually time it down to the second. So we leave the broad window open of 45 minutes, half hour, and we watch it and probe it. But right now, again, we don't have any ground truth confirmation that this is actually reaching the ground or any confirmation that we have of it doing that imminently. Not to say that you go and everything's merry and you move along in your own merry way. The tornado could be imminent at any moment. It's indicated on radar with the rotation we've been showing. Head to the basement or the lowest floor and wait for the all clear. And this is a tornado warning. Again, if we had a long track tornado on the ground, if we had something that we were confident maybe that was going towards a major city, it would become a tornado emergency. That is not the case here. So there's another tier totally to this whole mess, but we have not reached that point, thank goodness. So we're not in that imminent threat in the sense that we know there's something on the ground, but it could drop at any moment. Glenn, over to you.
Yeah, Pete, I was just curious as well, because I know we don't have a tornado on the ground today, but over the summer months, the frequency of tornado warnings and tornadoes touching down was higher than what we typically see.
Some of that is the fact that we have really good technology now, Glenn, and maybe long ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, or more, we didn't have that kind of technology, so we weren't as confident in that, and maybe something touched down and then it was attributed to wind damage. But now that we have that technology to really see into these clouds and peer into those wind fields and have the ground truth confirmation, first of all, and have all those products at our disposal where we can see, add all those three products together and boom, we have a radar indicated tornado, then that's a different story too. And a lot of this too is proactive, as I just mentioned. You don't want to be in a situation where there was no warning. I had no idea it was coming. You don't want to be in that.
Side of caution is always better.
Absolutely. In this case, absolutely, Glenn. But if you're just joining us until 6:30, we have this tornado warning, Foxborough, Mansfield, particularly right now in Plainville, Massachusetts, North Attleboro, just about in the clear. If you're behind this storm in Franklin and Bellingham, sure, it's rain, but you're not in the warning. It's hard to see that magenta coloring. I'm sorry about that, but you can see if you broaden it out a little bit where that exactly is. If I could shut off the radar, I'd do that, and I'll do that right now. Now we have a better idea of the actual boundaries of that, and it's up to Walpole and Medfield. Although, honestly, this part is not really concerning to us. The rotation is down here. So this area, even though you're in that warning and possibly your phone's gone crazy over the last 10 minutes, it's down near Plainville and down near these locations that we're watching that potential. Bacon Street right now, shear, if I put the shear on, you can see it a little bit better. You can see the path that's been taking here and the shear tracks as well. You can see how it's evolved and how we're kind of pinpointing it in that box area in this magenta coloring, how we kind of narrowed it down into that area right now. So there's rotation certainly on the map and on our radars. As far as that being a huge concern for us, yeah, it is. As far as that being a positively, absolutely tornado on the ground, no, we're not. So we haven't reached that point yet, and I got a lot of stuff that I've stacked on top of one another. Let me just reset there. You can see too, again, it's not as descriptive, it's not as intense, but I'm not using the best of radars, honestly. That is the old school radar, the terminal radar here, just north of Abington. And you can see too that the radar is a little bit better at showing it. If I turn that off and turn the box on, I can see it a little bit better, but our problem with that is obviously the fact that we are a little bit too close to the radar. Tevin, over to you.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's sort of the worst case scenario, right? You've got a weakening system overall, the radar not in the best positioning too, which by the way, this is one of the reasons why we lobby for better technology to give you a better heads up and advancement as to what may, some of these storms may rather look like. Still for this tornado warning until 6:30 at the very least. Pete was showing us some of this rotation right here, just to the south of I-495, almost at the juncture of I-495 and Highway 1 is where there's a very faint area of rotation. A bit more concerning now to the north in Norfolk and Rentham, all the way to Walpole too, and just to the west of Highway 1, we've got more thunderstorms. And I can actually hear, by the way, outside of our studios, more thunderstorms as well. So that's just a little bit more concerning. We're still in that sort of ripe, if you will, environment for more thunderstorms to lead to the chance of not only flash flooding, but at the very least a little bit more energy into the atmosphere for some of that rotation to continue. So the area of rotation somewhere right about in here, it's very faint and difficult to make out, but it's still in and around Shepherdville at the very least at last check, west of Highway 1, north of Plainville, and then pushing towards the north and east to 15 miles an hour, by the way, of north and east of I-495 and working its way to East Foxborough here in the next couple of moments, 6:21. So you got 2 minutes. If you're in South Foxborough, don't wait until 6:21. Get to a safe location right now and stay there until you're given the all clear. In Mansfield, that's at about 6:30. East Foxborough at 6:37, and then ultimately Stoughton right around 7:03. Randolph and Braintree too. If the storm makes it into the metro, now we know that there's a stationary boundary out there. We know that we have a little bit of spin in the atmosphere, and that little bit could be just enough to then continue some of these same thunderstorms at the very least, and the potential for more rotation all the way closer towards the Boston metro and portions of the South Shore. We've seen it time and time again. You just talked to Glenn, you talked to Priscilla. They mentioned this is not the first go at severe weather and tornadoes throughout the course of the summer months. It seems like we've had a little bit more activity than normal. So this is certainly a scenario where it's very possible. I mean, this was one cell that came out of Cumberland and Rhode Island on the backside of the pre-existing tornado warning. So it too presented at the very least enough energy, enough signs, and enough concern for the National Weather Service to warn on it until 6:30. So we've got 10 more minutes. We're going to be with you for those full 10 minutes here on NBC Boston. We want to thank our audience for watching, by the way, on several different platforms on NECN. We're also streaming this on Peacock too. We're on YouTube TV. And this is important, and I let you know this because if you're streaming us on your phone, if your power goes out and you still have that stream, you are still able to get the life-saving information and the tornado warnings, the flash flood warnings that we may see sort of spawn out of today. And even in the coming days too, we're tracking Hurricane Lee as well. I think we'll have plenty of more bouts of rainfall to go specifically along the coast. So download that app, the NBC 10 Boston app. Keep it close with you, keep it in your pocket, and keep safe. Pete, I don't know if you've seen any of the storm reports. I was piercing through, trying to mine through to see if I saw any sort of report of significant damage or anything like that. I know that we looked at some of that in Rhode Island and in Connecticut, but I haven't seen any just yet for the greater Boston Metro. And
I have it up now, Tevin, and the last one was back in Foster, Rhode Island. So nothing as of yet. That's not to say that we couldn't get something going here. And we could have some downdrafts and some small scale wind damage from some straight line winds. But right now, looking at the velocity scan, I was actually checking out the closer radar, which would be the Taunton or Norton radar. And, you know, it's honest, if it were that close and that down to the ground, you'd be able to see it. So we don't have any truth, any confirmation that actually this is near the ground, because this beam that comes out of Norton is pretty low right here on the horizon. So if something were to touch down or be near the horizon, as in a tornado, then you would be able to see that a little bit more descriptively, and we don't see that signature. We do see some pretty strong winds, though, in that area. That is curious, isn't it?
Yeah, right through, what is that, juncture 495 and Highway 1.
Yeah.
I think that's where the rotation is. I think that's where we're sort of fixated and focused at. But
with that gate-to-gate shear, I don't think you should be really that concerned, right? I mean, that's not something that is screaming at me that would be concerning. Again, we're using the closest radar, and that is honestly not the best case scenario here. You probably don't want to be using that, but I like the colors. They look a lot more distinct, and this one, when we change radar sites, is not all that awesome, but it's old school, and sometimes that can work for you too. So that is what we're seeing here a little bit better. But you can see too a little bit of a field there. I mean, and that is the terminal radar. So yeah, there's something in there, and still something maybe that we'll be watching. And I'm just thinking, Tevin, that the warning may be done now. I think, oh no, it's
I
still
don't,
there.
no, it's still there.
Yeah, we still have it until 6:30. So if you're just joining us, just to recap, we do have a new tornado warning with a separate thunderstorm now from Foxborough to Mansfield. Right now, we're experiencing a lot of heavy rain in those two towns. Our concern is to the south of those cities, south and east, south and west, towards Plainville and North Attleboro for our velocity scan right in here, really towards Foxborough. Yeah, that looks like it's right over Gillette, huh?
Yep, that's it. Yep.
That's right there.
And that's through what Rentham, so the Rentham Outlets are just to the south of that label.
Yeah, right in Foxborough, Mansfield. So let's go down to street level mapping, and you can see South Street, South Foxborough, over towards Forbes Road, Copeland Street. These are the areas that you really need to be down in the lowest level of your home or business too. And a tornado warning, if you need a refresher, tornado is imminent, maybe occurring, but we're not certain on that part of it. Spotted or indicated on radar, meaning there's rotation there. We know there's rotation. We put up the warning. Head to the basement or the lowest level, center of a building if you don't have a basement, and wait for the all clear. That's most important too. We're also seeing signs that there's plenty of heavy rain with all of these cells, and this will be a flash flood threat here shortly if it isn't already. And back into Rhode Island, we've seen plenty of that, but Foxborough now with inundating rain, and Walpole too. We are not in that in Attleboro. What? Attleboro? Breathe a sigh of relief on that, right? That is something that we're very fortunate with. And the tornado warning is to your north. Priscilla, you had a question.
Yeah, so I'm looking on social media trying to see if anyone's posted any damage in these areas. One photo I saw on Twitter, someone near Foxborough reporting a mesocyclone. What is that?
Mesocyclone is inside the cloud. It is the rotation inside the cloud. Sometimes it can produce the tornado. It spawns from the mesocyclone. And sometimes the mesocyclone sits harmlessly inside the cloud, the spin, and just rotates as the storm goes along, and it never touches down. Sometimes we can have mesocyclones inside a cloud and not have a tornado warning. So mesocyclones don't necessarily mean and guarantee a tornado, but they are rotation features inside the cloud. They're in the cloud.
And you mentioned earlier a rain-wrapped tornado.
Right.
What is the difference between that and a regular tornado? Is it more dangerous?
It is, because it's obscured, it's shielded and hidden inside the rain. The rain is pounding down. You don't have great visibility. You don't know where the tornado is. It could be here, it could be there, and it just sometimes suddenly appears. A lot of people have said that about tornadoes in New England. In the Midwest, they can be sometimes very distinct. You see them on the horizon. You see the storm spotters and the storm chasers, see those at a distance, and they can say, it's here, it's there. Look at it spin. Look how pretty it is. They're not rain wrapped. They're in a clear air area of the thunderstorm. So the rain wrapped are especially the most difficult ones, and especially at night. I mean, if you have a rain wrapped tornado at night, it's especially deadly, and you don't know where that is.
And after we just saw what happened in Leominster and Fitchburg with all of that rain and the flash flooding, is this storm something that could cause what we just saw in those communities in this path? It
can. These, by their nature, tornado warnings are severe thunderstorms too, so they can produce flash flooding, they can produce vicious lightning, they can produce hail, and they can produce plain wind. So just because you're in a tornado warning, your greatest fear isn't just the tornado warning, it's a multiple thing. It's like the heavy rain, the lightning, the hail potential. Right now, the hail does not seem like a big factor at all. If we were to look at the hail shaft or the hail tracks coming out of the hail shaft in the cloud, there doesn't seem to be anything in the hail tracks. I have heavy rain, and we have the rotation tracks too. From this particular cell as it came out of Rhode Island, Plainville right now, you can see plenty of rotation, but we're at the head of that rotation, which would be in South Foxborough that we're seeing the possibility of rotation here. And South Street, Forbes Boulevard, West Street, Grove Street, these are all very vulnerable areas. There's a golf course right in here too. You can see that a little bit better now. And this is in Walnut Street, Country Club Lane. Wow, right there. Talk about a bad time to be golfing. Again, these are neighborhoods that sometimes the computer picks out. Foxvale, I'm not really familiar with that. East Foxborough, and I lived in Foxborough too. Mansfield, North Main Street, Spring Street, and Moore Street, you can see here also in the path of that rotation and inside that tornado warning. We are not necessarily concerned, in fact, we aren't about tornadoes in Walpole, Medfield, Rentham, and that needs to be said too, right? They're in the warning right now, but our focus is south in this area through Plainville and down through South Foxborough. We do have live pics in Foxborough. That'd be great to see. Oh, here we go. Yeah, heavy rain. Is this is this Thunder Truck? Is this our new Thunder? This is not Thunder Truck. Okay, this is maybe Weather Warrior, just a crew. Okay, just a crew. So we have that. You can see the heavy rain coming down right now. Let's go back to the velocity scan and a little bit more descriptive now and what we're seeing here. If I scroll through this, you could see it evolve maybe, and there's not enough frames in that particular frame on this radar, unfortunately, but you see something in there through Mansfield and Foxborough too. Again, the broad circulation, something that we're really accustomed to. These tornadoes, if they do form in New England, are very, very sneaky, very cunning in the fact that they can drop in 2 to 3 minutes. They can be very weak tornadoes, and they can lift up very quickly too. So these are not surprises in the sense that we're never informed that they're coming, but we're not certain narrowing it down to the exact second when they drop out of the cloud and reach the ground. That's the thing about this too. So we'll stay on the air until 6:30. We're almost done too with the newscast. We'll be tossing a nightly. I believe after this, I want to be sure of that before we write off, but the tornado warning has about 2 minutes left in it. And again, tornado threat aside, we have a long list of issues here with this heavy rain that goes all the way back to Connecticut. These are slow-moving thunderstorms, as Tevin had mentioned. We have the head of them back to Weymouth and over towards Hull right now, in a line back into western Connecticut. The whole line moving slowly to the east. Individual cells are moving even slower. So there's a huge threat for flash flooding here in these areas. If you're in Rentham and Plainville, you have plenty more water to go through here in the next hour before you're in the all clear. Even though that warning may be dropped here in the next minute or so, it is not a situation where you want to let your guard down in terms of maybe flooded basements or backyards. We still have that threat. Flash flooding could be imminent here in the next hour as these storms move through. They are not letting the guard up in terms of leaving us alone with the heavy rain. One last look quickly now with the tornado warning until 6:30. You can see through Mansfield and Foxborough. Seems to be something there, some sort of rotation, enough for us to be concerned about, you know, maybe this storm continuing on. We'll see if it does, but we do have to go to nightly at 6:30